So the core principle, mastery's true nature. If mastery isn't perfection, then what is the true definition of a master? One thing I've began to understand that mastery is not the absence of the lower, but the discipline of choosing the higher response to the lower impulse. So basically, anytime you have an understanding between what I would like to consider heaven or hell, and you get caught in purgatory, your goal is to see the lower, transmute it, and make it a higher. There's also something called the law of neutralization, where you allow the pendulum to swing back and forth from low to high, and you stay at the high and watch the low. So at this point, it's not like you're not acknowledging the lead that creates the gold. You've acknowledged it by being aware of the lead as you stay gold. And over time, you practice this. The mastery is you practicing it. The mastery is you understanding that the more you do it, is the better you become with it, because this is a normal lifestyle. It's not like you're just doing it from a space of, I'm trying to get to a space of where I don't have to do this no more. This is the lifestyle. This is the mastery. It's constant, higher over lower. If you read this book called The Kybalion, or The Kybalion, it basically tells you mastery doesn't consist of abnormal fantasies or abnormal visions or just fantasies. It basically consists of you putting higher over lower. And that looks like you saying, well, you know what? I've been hit with this decision-making process where, let's just say, should I rob these guys or should I go make money elsewhere from a state of my being and my passion? Like, I chose to do this live. I chose to create content from a space where I help people find themselves. I could be out there doing treacherous shit, but I don't think I should do that because I made a decision in relevance to my purpose. Understanding my purpose has nothing to do with being in a gang. Understanding my purpose has nothing to do with robbing anybody. I actually like talking about things like this because I get to be better for myself. So it's not like I'm sitting here just saying shit or doing shit. It's like I'm helping you by helping me. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's the direction you want to go in. I feel like as you go further in life, you start to realize your purpose is to love yourself and master yourself. A lot of times we go through different phases. That's why I said I'm not going to ignore the fact that some people get caught in phases where they may be quite immature, but then immature is perspective. You have to go through that experience so you can master yourself. So that's why I can't really say, well, hey, don't do this and don't do that. Your life is your life for you. That's why mastery looks like you putting higher over lower. Sometimes you got to go through that phase of lower and then realize, oh snap, this ain't really my thing. So then you learn from that and then you experience that and then become better from it. Yeah. Yo, I'ma holler, bro. Love you too, bro. Good weekend. Yeah. So that's the vibe. When it comes to mastering oneself, one has to understand also, you got to change your self-talk. A lot of times the language that we speak to ourselves is so fucking fucked up. And when I say fucked up, I mean from a space of blaming. There's a difference between accountability and blaming oneself. So if you understand, because you know how you feel when you blame yourself for things? You feel guilty. And I feel like that's embodying guilt from a space of I don't believe in myself. And by the way, you have to go through that to get to a space of understanding and relevance to self-love, self-awareness, self-care. You have to go through that low. And I think a lot of times we don't understand that's part of mastery. You can't be a true alchemist if you don't understand the lead that created the gold. Okay, there's no success without failure. The lead is the gold. Now, a lot of times we're so caught up in looking at, let's say for example, everybody doesn't want to go through problems, but everybody wants to go through their idea of a solution. Nobody wants to go through hell to get to heaven. Everybody just wants to instantly get to heaven. And what you consider that is instant gratification, because everybody wants this fantasy-like version of themselves that they've never experienced, because the expectation is higher than the unknown. So as you get comfortable with mastering yourself, you start to realize, oh snap, I don't control the outcome. My expectation is constantly changing. So your mind has to be malleable. It has to be open. You can't really be living life from a space of expectation. And if you do, the expectation has to be healthy. And what you consider a healthy expectation is you understanding that there's two poles of truth. And this is the idea of polarity. Everything has an opposite. So where there's an expectation that may go correct, there's a version of that that may not go correct. Once you kind of understand the lead and the goal within that, you start to live life from a smoother place. This is kind of what makes life a lot more easier. When you're not so focused on the goal and you forget about the lead. Because you're so scared to go through the aspect of failure that nobody understands that in order to commit to success, you actually have to commit to failure. What the fuck do I mean by that? You cannot be successful if you cannot commit to fail. Let me tell you something about me starting a clothing brand. One thing I noticed is every shirt that I fucked up, every time I put the heat press down and I realized that I didn't put it on the right temperature, I didn't tighten it, at this point where I'm at now, I sold about 25 to 30 shirts maybe. And I'm thinking to myself, at one point, I was fucking up at least 5 or 6 shirts, 7 shirts, and I was okay with that process. Even though the traditional thinking behind it was like, hey, listen, you gotta be very careful. You don't want to fuck up. But who's out here not making mistakes? You got Keanu Reeves, his parents died when he was younger. Tyler Perry was homeless. You got so many people going through all these aspects of shit, but we're so caught up on society's perspective of perfect. That's the problem. And the problem is actually your perspective. Men are not ruined by things, they're ruined by their perspective of it. So if you think that, hey, damn, failure is a ruin, you have to ask, why am I considering failure this way? In a way where it feels like self-sabotage. This is kind of why nobody has no incentive. I remember when I started my rolling paper brand, right? And I decided to go from Flatbush. Now I was walking down and I'm like, yo, bro, if you walk all the way down here, it's just gonna be a long ass walk. You might not get into any stores. Listen, you have to acknowledge these negative thoughts. And the law of neutralization states you have to let that pendulum swing. The law of compensation states this: for the same amount of happiness comes the same amount of sadness. And then when you start to understand how to let your sadness go past you as you stand and watch it, you have to watch that pendulum. This is what makes life easy. This is the secret to living life. Watch that pendulum swinging. And it's not only about doing it. You have to watch the pendulum swinging and you let that negativity swing in your unconscious because you're still acknowledging the negativity. So it's not like you're not acknowledging it. You're acknowledging the negativity. As you acknowledge it, it passes through. A lot of times, thoughts and understandings are very much so clouds. And the more you start to understand that your thoughts are clouds, is the better you get at kind of letting things, I want to say letting things go. Because the whole goal is not to be, all right, so life is not about self-control. It's about self-recognition. You got to understand, right, that you cannot control thoughts, outcomes. You can't make things match your expectations. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. And even then, sometimes the variables can be very funny and random. So now you're at a space where you start to understand this. Allow your thoughts to flow. Allow the pendulum. A lot of times you'll have motherfuckers watching, like, let's just say, for example, you'll watch a movie, right? And you'll get so caught up in the movie. And you'll be like, yo, man. And you'll get so convicted into the movie. You'll be like, yo, why is it that this guy is doing this? First off, there's a writer, there's a narrative, there's things that you have to understand to truly enjoy a movie. Like, how about that movie Blade? If you compare Blade to Twilight, right? You'll see that Edward was able to walk in the sun, on cloudy days. You'll see that Blade was a day walker. That's one. How about this? Celine from Underworld. She could not stand in the sun. So it's like, you got to look at the narrative. Even though they're all vampires, the director has a different intention when he speaks about each vampire. So it's like, what's the narrative of the director? What is the understanding of the script? What is the director trying to get across? And when it comes to the idea of your movie, you have to start looking at yourself as the director. You start looking at yourself as the creator. And when you start looking at yourself as the creator, you start to let certain thoughts pass because not every thought you have to entertain. That's the whole goal. This is what makes life a lot more easier. Not every thought you have to entertain. Allow certain things to pass from an unconscious state. All right? Deep dive into the metaphor of alchemy, explain that the lead represents the dense, unrefined energy, the mistakes, the painful setbacks, the self-doubt. The failure is not a terminal point, but the raw material that contains the necessary wisdom. It's the lesson that forces expansion. Look, write down in the comments, if you can, write down a time that you've been through something and you've realized that the pain that came with it actually led to your success. Comment if you can. But a lot of times we don't understand the importance of pain. We don't understand the importance of grit, right? So, and that's the thing. You got to be vulnerable about your pain from a space where you understand that pain is the main foundation behind success. Mistakes is how you fucking learn. All right. Challenging. All right. Why are we psychologically trained to reject the lower half of our experience? Why are we psychologically trained to, damn. Societal egoic addiction to highs and the fear of lows. Explain that by resisting the low, sadness, loss, failure, we lock ourselves out of the wisdom it contains, thereby preventing the transformation to high. The low is the energy source. The high is the result. You need both. Damn. I don't think we understand that we do need both. And we are used to actually embracing a higher version of things, and we let that lower half just lag. Like everybody wants to be their highest version of self, but nobody cares about their shadow self. So it's like, and this is kind of the representation of the ego that I don't really fuck with, because I'm not gonna lose my ego. I just learn how to manage it and give it a different perspective to life. Because that's what this subconscious shit is about. The subconscious doesn't understand bad or good. It understands your free will. That means you have to educate yourself based on the science of what the fuck you think you are. And then all of a sudden, as you embody that, you start to attract things that that come within relevance to what you're on. So it's like, if I'm having these type of thoughts, you have to question who you actually are. This is what you got to do. If you don't know how to question yourself and you're just making decisions from a subconscious space, you may have to question your childhood, because a lot of times the decision making that you have comes from childhood trauma, childhood habits. You may have seen people living a certain way. You may have came across certain philosophies. Like when I was younger, I participated in church, like being a Christian. And it was to the point where I went through a lot of shit, man. I went through a lot of fucking shit. I went through just going through some shit with having dreams about the rapture, the versions of God, versions of the devil. And it was because I was subconsciously in that shit every fucking day. And as I came out of it, the more I pulled into myself, and me understanding I was the creator is the better I became at understanding me. And I began to attract things like I got a beautiful son, another son on the way, a beautiful lady. I understand feminine. I understand the idea of masculine. And by the way, you have to understand these things from a space where it leads to your growth. If the shit don't lead to your growth, you gotta actually ask yourself, if every time I do this and these habits, it's leading to a guilty aspect of me questioning myself, because that's what guilt is. Guilt is you questioning yourself in relevance to what you're aligned with. Like, should I do this? Should I do that? But yeah. I like doing this. I'll be here then. I'm here.